Remember that water balloon that we made in the Gizmo series? We are going to turn it into a game mechanic. Before we can get started, I recommend building a base for the balloons to originate from and respawn to. Then, we're going to create a return script so that the balloons go back to their starting positions. So from the water balloon script, bring over the when world is started code block. And then from the values tab, grab 2 of the set 2 code blocks. On our variables tab, we will create an origin position vector variable and an origin rotation variable. We can then bring these variables to the left sides of the set 2 code blocks. On our operators tab, under object transform, you're going to bring over position of object and rotation of object. From values, we can get self. Now, on world start, we set origin position to the position of self and origin rotation to the rotation of self. You'll remember we moved the balloon up by 50 meters. Let's delete this code block from our motion tab and bring over the move to and rotate to code blocks. Please note that these are instant motion variants. We can now replace the vector and rotation values with the original variables we created. That's awesome. So these balloons will now return after hitting players. So great work. Persistent player variables are an incredible tool for keeping track of player stats. From settings in your build menu, go to the player tab, click on new, and we will call this one score. After clicking create, we can now use this variable in our scripts. There are number variables tied to each player that start at 0, and unless reset, these variables will persist between sessions in your world. This means that you can track high scores, money, or even create save points. Please note that a player variable can be used by default scripts, but they are not available for use in local scripts. Now let's use our score variable to track how many times a player has hit another player with a water balloon. Open up the water balloon script and let's start by keeping track of who threw the balloon. Let's create a new variable called myPlayer and we'll set its type to player ID. Next, drag over the event when object is released by player, and from the values tab, grab set2. Place the myPlayer variable on the left and bring the green player pill down to the right. Great, so now we have saved the player ID of who threw the balloon. Now at the bottom of the when colliding with player event, from our values tab, bring over set player persistent variable. From the dropdown, select the score variable, and on the operators tab, grab the plus symbol to replace the number value. From your values tab, grab a number input for the B slot and set it to 1. Then at the top, grab gets player persistent variable and place it in the A slot. We can select the score from the dropdown and fill in the empty player slots with myPlayer from the variables tab. Now the player's score increases by 1 every time the balloon collides with a player. Sometimes the balloon will register hitting a player twice. We can create a Boolean variable named once per that prevents double counting. When object is released by player, bring over the set2 code block, placing once per on the left and Boolean value true on the right. Then duplicate by selecting the whole set2 code block and thumbstick to the right in the when colliding with player events. We can then set Boolean value to false. Now bring an if code block into the collision event. Then from the operators tab, grab the and code block, placing once per on the left and a not equals to symbol on the right. We can then check that a player collision is not with myPlayer. dragging the player pill to the left and the my player variable to the right. Then indent all of the collision events code blocks so that they will only go off one time. You might remember that when we throw the water balloon at a wall, we also receive a collision event with player, but the player value is server player. This should not increase a player's score. So to solve this, there is another great use of the if code block, which is to nest if statements. Then duplicate the not equals code block. From values, replace my player with server player, and then drag the set player variable into the new if code block, allowing for wall splashes, but preventing points for wall collision. To test our work, from the Values tab, grab debug print code block and place it inside the collision events if statement. Next, grab variable as string and duplicate the get player variable code block from above. Now, in our build menu, on the script tab, we can see that when a player is hit by a balloon, the score of the thrower is increased. Nice work. Feel free to delete the debug print code block when you are done. And in the next section, we will create a scoreboard.